There we go. Hello, guys, and welcome back to another episode of No More Kids in Scientology. And for this next episode, you guys, we have a very special guest, a very good friend of the channel, none other than the amazing, the wonderful Miss Miriam Francis. Hello, Miriam.
Hi, Serge. So nice to be here. It's
It's
so
been a
good. We haven't,
minute.
yeah, it's been a little while. So it's really good to sort of like come back and chat to you about these topics that are so important to us. They're so near and dear to our hearts. And yeah, and it's just, yeah. So I'm really looking forward to this conversation.
Definitely. Well, you guys, this conversation has to do with what just Miriam said, something that's very near and dear to our hearts, which is the continued advocacy for the kids that are stuck inside the Scientology hotels. And in this case, we are going to be speaking about the country of origin that Miriam is from, because well, we wanted to read this little prepared statement that we made to kind of just get into what we wanted to make without having to go all over the place. So here's what we wanted to say about Australia. So Australia, so-called bastion of law and justice, has blood on its hands. It was within your borders that Scientology found the legal refuge it so desperately needed to disguise itself as a religion. You were the first to provide the cult with a roadmap. And in doing so, you became the architects of a loophole that allowed one of the most sinister organizations in modern history to escape the scrutiny it deserved. In your courts, in your legislative halls, the groundwork was laid.
Oh, you might have frozen, Serge. Oh no.
All right, you guys. Our
You're
stream
back.
is having, yeah, it's having some glitches, and Nora was having these glitches as well a little bit before. So thank you for hanging in there with us.
That's so good.
As we were saying, L. Ron Hubbard's followers seized upon this legal framework, using it to entrench themselves in positions of power and influence while making the horrific abuses they inflicted on those least able to defend themselves, the kids. The children were groomed, manipulated, and enslaved, their innocence stolen under the guise of religious doctrine. And their innocence is not coming back. All the while, your laws provide the shield for that innocence to be stolen. Australia is a nation that claims to champion human rights and the rule of law, but it has failed its own children and, by extension, countless of others around the world. You allowed Scientology to exploit the very principles you purport to hold dear: freedom of religion, freedom from prosecution, and twisted them into tools of oppression. You enabled this cult to commoditize vulnerable kids, to turn children into compliant slaves, and while hiding behind a veneer of legality. And for what? The so-called right to believe? At what cost? And who is paying that price? Your failure to protect those who could not protect themselves has not only stained your own legacy, but has emboldened Scientology to continue its abusive practices globally. Your courts set a precedent that allowed this organization to spread its tentacles worldwide, using the same legal tricks and loopholes that you so graciously provided. The result: countless lives destroyed, families torn apart, and children subjected to unspeakable horrors, all because you gave them the tools to do so. Australia, you must reckon with the legacy that you have created. The children who were sacrificed on the altar of Scientology's lies deserve justice, and the world is watching, and history will not be kind to those who stood idly while the most vulnerable kids inside the Scientology hotels were exploited. It is time for Australia to own up to its role in this travesty and to take a stand against the abuses that you have helped to propagate. Until you do, your claim to be a nation of laws and justice will remain a hollow, bitter irony, remembered not for your values, but for your failure to uphold them. So that is our opening statement. What would you like to say about that, Miriam?
Yeah, I think so many important points in there, and I would say it's been an interesting history. There's been almost like this battleground. Australia's really been a battleground between Scientology and sort of the government, and how far government can step into this sort of like environment of belief, of a belief system, right? And what the focus needs to be is that it's not about beliefs, because everyone has a right to believe in whatever they want to, right? But it's about the actual actions that they take, and the doingness, what they're actually doing. And our focus has always been on what's happened to the children, what continues to happen to the children, that they are continuing to be violated in ways that cause damage. And so we really want to see an end to this. And it's interesting, this conversation about the we were talking about earlier, there is this cloak of this religious protection that we have to contend with. It's a reality that we have to contend with the recognition that this organization is a religion, that they have tax exempt status that allows them to have so much more freedom than a normal organization or corporation would have. And that's really what we sort of are up against in a lot of ways. And Serge, you've got a video that we're going to sort of comment on that is really relevant to this conversation. We had a huge movement around the time period of 2009 to 2010 with the Senator Xenophon. And T from Per Scientology Audit, by the way, we want to do some dives together at some stage when we can do that. But I'm sort of really interested in getting into the nitty gritty and the details of the Scientology in Australia history, because there is tons of it. And as you expressed in that statement, it's like it created these pivotal impacts, worldwide impacts that have not been able to be reversed. So we have to, that's a huge thing that we have to contend with, and it's a reality that we have to contend with. Now, we had a massive player in Australia who wanted to make a difference, which was Senator, at the time, he was an independent senator, Nick Xenophon, wanted to create a change in terms of this recognition of Scientology, so that they wouldn't be allowed to continue doing what they were doing without any checks and balances. And so he wanted to bring in this public benefits test. Anyways, I don't know if you want to now go to that video, or if there's anything else you wanted to comment on in regards to that.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, it's been a battleground country where some people have tried to take a stand against the cult, but they're always missing the cult's withhold, because they are purposely fed misinformation, which is the tools of the trade of the gaslighters that child traffic does. They're very, very good at playing dumb. And that is the danger that Scientology sycophants of L. Ron Hubbard pose to society at large. They always play dumb. They go, oh, no one had a shred of a clue. Oh, we really thought we were saving a planet. And that shtick has been literally processed by the corporate media. They've given them all this grace and all this benefit of the doubt. And, oh, you really want to come clean. And, oh, poor you were in a cult. And, oh, you had no shred of a clue. But that is what's kept the cult alive.
Yeah.
This idea that the world can just make up excuses for consenting adults that sign up for what is being offered at the Scientology hotels. And we couldn't be more disgusted or nauseated that part of that sign up is unfettered access to kids who are made fair game by their own
Mhm.
parents, brought to these hotels, already groomed to be abused, already groomed to not feel when they're getting abused because the child
Mm.
is sold all these reframes of, oh, you're gonna go get a session and kidnapping is a completely different story. And when we were being audited and being locked up in rooms, unable to move, unable to say no, unable to call anyone, unable to say stop, unable to leave the room, all of those things have been camouflaged because at the end of the day, the corporate media has never done due diligence, proper due diligence. They don't have skin in the game. They've been very glib at reporting the story because they've only gotten to their little frenzy wensy. Oh, Mike Rinder, really do tell us how it was when you were there at the hotel. And Mike Rinder is happy to tell them what he wants them to know. And he
Exactly.
knows none of them had eyeballs. And he knows no one can question what he's saying. And he knows exactly how to say it and how to pitch it so that it lands. I mean, I would call him like a media whisperer. Everybody
Hmm.
of these media people that have interviewed him that have been so thitty weedy, so glib, they don't know how to pull strings. They don't know, like, this is not making sense. What about this? What about that? There's
Well,
never
search
pulling a
is
string.
right, and they don't have comparative information that we do. We have that comparative information based on our experiences. So when Mike Rinder stands there and says, "Well, I knew nothing about this," we're like, "Well, hang on, but I saw you were doing this, and I read this report, and you were doing this, and in this statement you say this." Now all that body of information is sort of all adding up. Now we talk about Mike Rinder. He is a huge player in the history of Scientology in Australia because he was the head of the Office of Special Affairs international, right? He was responsible for what happened in Australia, and that his activity that you can actually see in terms of, like, there's news articles. It's also written in his book. In 1985, he came out to Australia. He was in Adelaide. He was marching on Parliament in Adelaide. And that was in regards to the select committee, and that's a whole other thing I want to do a deep dive on separately, so I won't won't get too distracted with that. But he had a heavy involvement. I mean, he's from Adelaide, and the two biggest states in terms of, I mean, there's also New South Wales, but I would say, like, in terms of cities, or states, you have Melbourne, Victoria, and you have Adelaide, South Australia. They're the two biggest locations for Scientology, for these really pivotal big movements. There is a big organization in Sydney, but a lot of this activity, like these bands and like this, a lot of this back and forth in these battlegrounds, was really within these two states.
Mm.
And so you have Mike Rinder is from Adelaide. His whole family is from Adelaide. He has a whole long history there. He's in this marching on Parliament in 1985 with Heber Gents. And being involved in this, the select committee again was looking into Scientology, into whether it could, in terms of like restricting it and restricting what people had access to or what they could participate in regards to Scientology. And anyways, that's a whole nother story. But there's this long history there of Mike Rinder being involved with Australia and these efforts to, you know, like subvert the efforts of government into thwarting Scientology. And also we have information about his involvements even recently as 2010, which are interesting, which we can get into later. But what I want to say is that for a long time, you talked about the media as well. I mean, Mike Rinder's prior position in Scientology was he was in charge of media and he was in charge of legal cases. Well, what happened after he left and he came into this anti-Scientology movement? What did he become? He became the head of media and the head of legal cases. So every single legal case that was an anti-Scientology that was against Scientology, legal case, that went through Mike Rinder. He was the one that was vetting or saying, yes, go ahead or not or whatever. And then also with all these media stories, I mean, I've spoken to journalists and they're like, Mike Rinder is my friend. It's like, how did this, this like total. So he had this position of power in Scientology. He maintained that position of power after he left, or came back into that position of power in this anti-Scientology movement. And in between that was this really interesting time period of when he was in the independent Scientology movement, which that gets really interesting because that was a time period where he still believed in Scientology. He still wanted Scientology to continue. And we've got an article that I really want to have a look at if we can get some time, if we can get to that. But yeah, anyways, there's lots to explore there. So maybe we'll just sort of dive into it so we don't, yeah.
Okay, perfect. So here's what we wanted to share with you guys. This segment that we're going to kind of react to. Let's see what it says.
And there are new calls for the Church of Scientology to have its tax-free charity status revoked. Independent Senator Nick Xenophon is concerned about allegations in a damning new documentary and has called for an urgent review of its registration. Senator Xenophon joins us now. Senator, good morning.
Good morning.
What is your biggest concern about Scientology being registered as a charity?
So one thing I wanted to say right away here, Miriam, is Senator moves to revoke the church's charity status, right? And we've had this sort of like talking point about, oh yeah, let's really remove its charity status, right? And it's like, if a charity is harming children at an industrial size scale, in what world are we begging the people that give these people the right to abuse kids at an industrial size scale? Like, the governments are in on enabling this corruption, even though everything always kind of plays out so-called independent. Oh, the IRS has no clue, right? But meanwhile, we know that every single Scientologist that goes to flag, that gets asked, have you committed a felony for which you have not been arrested, that literally tells them, oh yeah, there's this felony, that felony, that felony. Okay, let's give you an auditing program. Let's really charge you $100,000. Let's really put that on your American Express. Let's really ask the IRS to take off $100,000 off of your tax bill. And now the felony you just literally admitted to us has floated. So I guess the technology of L. Ron Hubbard is that miraculous that it supersedes all legal proceedings, that it supersedes all common sense. And there's this push to be so propitiative about like, oh, if only the people, the big powers that be at the IRS, the big powers that be, from a senator begging the Australian people to please remove this charity thing. And it's like, what in the literal, living, actual hell? How are these countries operating these centers that they purport are charitable, but we would know they weren't charitable? Like, sorry, it sucks to be us, the kids that were enslaved, the ones that were co-opted and told it's in your best interest to become a slave, and you are going to become a slave, and you signed this contract, and it couldn't be more binding, and it couldn't be more, your entire next life. So that's the type of wishy-washiness that needs to end from the IRS all the way to Australia. We need to start expanding the scope of the enablers that are causing this problem, because as much as everybody goes, oh, the only ones that are abusing anybody are inside the hotels, and if you go with the awareness of the public, they'll all say, oh, it was David Miscavige who was abusing everybody. If only he gets taken out, it couldn't be more great and wonderful. And yet,
and that's the
you
lie.
and I know that had anyone come and removed David Miscavige out of the hotels when we were there as children, guess what, you guys? Nothing would have changed in our lives. Miriam and I wouldn't have been more safe.
Yeah.
Miriam and I wouldn't have been more or less abused. It would have been the same exact thing, because these centers operate in a fake pyramid structure of unconscionable degenerates that prop themselves up to these positions. They are vying for these positions. Debbie Cook didn't just arrive at the captain FSO because she was, picked out of a hat. They performed, they auditioned, they put a whole personnel file together to really be like, oh, this is the person that you really need to tap to be the Office of Special Affairs person. Mike Rinder didn't end up there because he didn't put any effort. Debbie Cook didn't end up there because she didn't put any effort. They both had to prove that they had what it took to do the job, and that they wouldn't have been given an F about any kids that they abuse while doing the job to really clear a planet, to really save a world. So it is the year 2024. It's unfortunate that this so-called push from Australia, we're really going to get our act together. And meanwhile, all their efforts to get their act together have been derailed by a campaign of misinformation, weighed by the same people that were tapped to create the problem in the first place. Like you just said, Mike Rinder is there begging Australia to his daddy figure, L. Ron Hubbard. Oh my God, you guys, we really want to save our world. We really want to help people. And, Australian courts, because they're gullible or corrupt, pick your choosing. They went, oh my God, look, Mike Rinder really does want to help save a world. Let's approve him. Let's make him a charity. It really does sound charitable. But once again, it's like nothing ever goes anywhere because, the government bodies aren't equipped to go and save a bunch of adults that are so hell-bent in doing what in the hell they do to themselves inside of the hotels and commercial buildings. So
and so this is where it's problematic with the information that's being fed. I mean, just even at a glance, and we're not going to go into it in any depth, but even just in the reporting to the FBI, the focus of that case of the FBI was primarily on the international. I mean, it covered a lot of things, but when I want to say there's something that's repeated in those reports a number of times, which is that we never had any problems with anything until the early 2000s when David Miscavige he took over sort of sole leadership at that point through the early 2000s, but everything else was fine up until then. And saying that this is the lie. It's like, okay, first of all, this information is being given by perpetrators of crimes against children, right? So I mean, are they going to be so forthcoming about what they've done, the trafficking that they've been involved in, being leaders of a human trafficking organization? Like, no. So what they did is that, and I'm giving sort of like a broad statement here, but this was a lot of the statements in the FBI reports that were done, is that, no, there's this one leader, David Miscavige, and he's the problem, and that's it. Well, if only one person can't do all that, so then it can't be true. Like, how do you prove that? If everyone's like, oh yeah, well, he did all the bad things. Like, no, someone else has got to get, you got to get a few people who are willing to, say that what they did. They have to, unfortunately, incriminate themselves in order to incriminate him. And, whatever protections, that's why we have systems where protections are offered in order to give information, right? Because how do you take down an organized crime? It's made up of people, of an organization. It's made out of people. Anyways, so yeah, the thing is that there has been this narrative focusing on David Miscavige, which is an insane type of narrative, because you're not talking about what are the harms that are ongoing, what are the risks, what are the current risks for children. And you touched on earlier with the grooming of children, it starts there. And then once you have groomed the children, you can subject them to pretty much anything, and then you can traffic them. Essentially, you can use them for labor. You can and so anyways, but this grooming starts early with disconnecting these children from their own selves, disarming their brain body connection, and that's a whole nother topic. But this is incredibly damaging. So like we should be talking about these things, the effects that has on children. Modern psychology is completely the opposite to that of yeah, and the damages that get done to children. So yeah, just getting back to Senator Xenophon, he was a huge, like, he had this monumental campaign that he was bringing, and it was looking really promising. What he wanted to do is bring in this public benefits test, which was similar to what the UK already had in place. And now we have seen more recently that the UK was able to remove the tax exempt status for Scientology and maintain that. And that's what he was wanting to achieve in Australia. And he wasn't ultimately able to achieve that. But yeah, this is in the time period when he was really sort of forging ahead with that.
All right, so let's see what else he's saying here.
Well, it's registered as a charity because it's classified as a religion. There was a High Court decision back in 1983 that says that it has a tax-free status, but there are a number of associated entities where the Australian Charities and Not-for-Profit Commission could actually look at their books and make them more accountable. There's just been this documentary Going Clear in the US that has had a number of damning allegations about the Church of Scientology. The Australian operations are a branch of that in a sense, and all I'm saying to the Commissioner to deal with charities is have a close look at these allegations. If they apply here in Australia, then there are more questions that need to be asked about their tax-free status, because effectively all of us as taxpayers fund these tax-free organisations, and they need to be accountable.
So what are
Amazing.
So here, yeah, it's interesting because, again, you know, it goes back to the point that it's so frustrating for us, the children that are having
Right.
to hear this and having to hear all this sanitizing language about, oh, but the corporations this and the corporations that, and all this legal schmeagle that sanitizes the facts. Miss us with your corporation structure. We were stuck inside hotel rooms and commercial buildings as underage kids, locked up against our will, with our passports confiscated and locked away. These are serious felonies. You can't just be, oh yeah, let's
Right.
really scrutinize you a little more. Let's really check your books. Like, what?
Okay,
Like, check
so
the books.
right, so that's an interesting point that you raised. So with this inquiry that he was wanting to bring forward with the examination of the public benefits test, what is outside of that scope is investigating an organization. In other words, the government could not then become like the government body that would be required to do this inquiry. They are not there to investigate crimes. They're not part of criminal. They're not equipped to do a criminal investigation. So they can't assume that role or assume those duties. So this was never about investigation or investigation of crimes or like what it was to do was to examine, does this organization have benefit to the public? In other words, does it support the fact that the Australian people are paying for this through their taxpayer dollars? And it was to also show through that, the intention from Nick Xenophon was to show that there is harm as well as the good, but this could never be an investigatory action, unfortunately. And what it did
Which
largely
is what
hinge
is
on is,
needed, though,
yeah,
right? At the
which
end
is
of the
what
day,
is
that's
needed.
what's needed.
Correct.
Yeah, at the
Right.
time, I get it. They didn't have you. They didn't have me. They didn't have children
Yeah.
raising the alarm and saying they're abusing kids. Never mind that Australia did report a little bit about the children's RPF. But I mean, again, everything's just very glib. Everything's just a little bit superficial. This person said this, that person said that. Okay, next.
And then end of story. Right. And I would say there's a couple of really great journalists. I want to say Brian Seymour, I want to give some props to him. He did some massive stories, incredible stories. And we also had Steve Cannan as well, some incredible stories, and also his book as well, which was a really important book, has been a really important book for me. And there's been incredible work by Australians trying to do incredible things, and they're up against huge odds. Now, one of the odds that they're up against is that internally within this anti-Scientology movement, unfortunately, there has been efforts to sabotage, which is incredible. But what you have to sort of bring into view is the fact that you had these huge players, Marty Rathbun and Mike Rinder, who were at that time, 2009, 2010, they were part of the independent Scientology movement. And so they didn't want to bring down Scientology. They didn't want Scientology to be assessed for the harm as well as the good. Do you know what I mean? They didn't want the end of Scientology. They just wanted the end of David Miscavige. So that's really important to keep in mind, because you had this internal sabotage that was going on, and it really destroyed the efforts by Senator Xenophon. I mean, I'm really interested to hear, did Mike Rinder ever have conversations with Senator Xenophon? Because I know that Senator Xenophon was making pleas in the public arena for information in regards to Jan Eastgate, specifically the crimes that Jan Eastgate committed in covering up child sexual abuse of Carmen Raynor. Did Mike Rinder ever come forward of his information, since he was Jan Eastgate's boss? Mike Rinder was the person that should have come forward. Did he ever have a conversation with Nick Xenophon in this pivotal time that could have been monumental, that could have seen this key player, Jan Eastgate, charged? Like, you know what I mean? So there is this sabotage that was going on because there was vested interests, there was conflicts of interests.
The sabotage is historic and
continuing-
institutional for the last 74 years. And going back to the point, as long as the kids themselves don't start advocating, and how it's fallen on our shoulders to advocate for kids, you know, what all these senators have failed to do is go speak to kids that are affected by these people. What senators have failed to do is actually roll up their sleeves and investigate. Don't be told. Stop being told. Oh, I was told it was this. I was told it was that.
Right.
Stop being told. L. Ron Hubbard wrote everything on pieces of paper. You want to know the inside of Mike Rinder while he was stuck inside of those hotels? Go read L. Ron Hubbard so you can get an exact blueprint of how he was thinking, an exact blueprint of how he was judging, an exact blueprint of how he was calculating, including but not limited to getting you and your brothers ripped out of a country, brought all across state lines, across to another country, where then you and your brothers would be trafficked, including not limited to trafficked across state lines from California to then Florida, which is where your brothers ended up with me at the hotel stuck over there. So it couldn't be more movement of children all over the place. That where was these senators inquiring about kids? They haven't been anywhere on the lines to ask about that. They haven't been anywhere on the lines to do the heavy lifting that's required, because yes, breaking news, children need advocates that care. You got to be a lot smarter than the gaslighting adults that have spent their entire lifetime setting up infrastructures to carry out the crime. And if you don't have the capacity to understand that, then you don't belong in child advocacy, especially of this nature, especially this dire need to really go, oh, I'm up against huge gaslighters. I'm up against professional gaslighters. I'm up against ones that L. Ron Hubbard really programmed how to lie, how to play dumb on the spot. So that's all we've seen on the public record. And, you know, going back to how we were treated as kids, all these efforts that don't result in kids stop getting audited, stop getting ethics handled, and stop getting put through grooming courses couldn't be more abysmal, couldn't be more useless. Like, what was done to us as kids is still being done today. No amount of books, no amount of write-ups, no amounts of anything has even remotely reframed these parents from engaging in these disgusting abominations. And fine, we can call it out because we were there and we couldn't be more disgusted or upset that it was our childhood that was being commoditized by our own goddamn parents. And there's no inquiries into the parents by any of these senators. They all want to go after Scientology corporate to score their whatever political points they're looking for. Stop looking for political points. You want to get political points? Go to the root of the issue. Save the kids out of the hotel. Expose the racketeering criminal scheme that all of these governments have been all about aiding and abetting, because it's called aiding and abetting when you gave them the tax write-off for them to go get those type of services inside of a hotel. So as much as everybody goes, oh, it's them, it's this, it's all of y'all, all these countries that have gone, we're throwing a constitution to the trash because, you know, as long as you carve out a loophole to role play slavery with kids, then it's all okay. And I don't care what type of charity you're calling. There is no world or scenario where a child can end up tapped as a slave. They cannot consent to that role. And it couldn't be more obvious and against common sense that we have to be making that point, but that is the point that has not been made. I mean, imagine that with all the information that is out there on Scientology, no one has gone, well, wait a minute. So you went into the hotel, but then you brought your kids, and then you, as an adult, consented, signed the forms, paid the money to be all part of this culture. And then you expose your child to the same exact thing?
And Serge, I want to say that it takes a collective effort, and it takes, and this is why, this is the scope that needs to be viewed. It needs to be taken into consideration, because it's not just about a victim coming forward, and it's not just about someone, you know, one or two people championing that victim. That's not enough, because we saw with, we saw Brian Seymour, we saw him do incredible stories. We saw the championing of a few of the kids, of the kids who grew up and came forward in Australia, at least 3 of them. Incredible stories, and that had a huge impact on the way that people viewed Scientology in Australia. You know, and Senator Xenophon, he really championed Carmen Rayner and her efforts, like, for justice. These incredible efforts, but that's not enough, and that's what really needs to be considered. It's a collective effort, and so when you had other parties involved that were trying to subvert these efforts, like from the inside, it becomes really ineffective. You need another backup. Like, you need, so for example, this victim is saying this, well, then you're going to need supporting witnesses, aren't you? That just is what it is. And we did have some supporting witnesses in Carmen Rayner's case. Unfortunately, that wasn't enough, and that was a follow-up by Australian police. They had charged the incorrect charge. It was not relevant to the actual time that the crime had been committed, and then they decided not to retake up and pursue a new charge, a correct
And
charge.
that's what I'm saying, Miriam. It's like, miss
Right,
us with
because
the
it wasn't
1
enough.
billion and one technicalities of it's always never, but that's the point. In your case, it was not enough. In my case, it wasn't enough. In
Exactly.
Rainer's case, it wasn't enough. In everyone's case,
Yeah.
turns out that never is never enough.
But let me
And
say
we're
this,
just about
Serge.
well,
Well,
sick of that, because it's gaslighting.
Right.
We were there at the hotels. We saw what we saw with our own 2 eyes. And going back to the point, maybe it's the fact that we weren't adults. Maybe it's the fact that we didn't consent. Maybe it's the fact that we were co-opted into doing the bidding of a convicted felon, and we couldn't be more disgusted with the fact that that was done with our childhood. So miss us with the technicalities, senators, miss us with the technicalities, people that really have done nothing to help any child, because as of the year 2024, no one has done a shred of thing to stop the problem. And all they
Because
do
it wasn't
is
enough. Yeah, and so what I would say, Serge, is like, it
But it should have
requires
been
that
enough.
collective effort. Yeah, it should have been enough. It should have been enough. But I think that we did not have, with all the things stacked against it, I think that here's the thing: it has to be a collective effort. It has to be a large group. How did Scientology win every time? They brought a large group. They marched on Parliament in 1985 in Adelaide. They marched on, what was it, in Portland? Didn't they march on Parliament there? Whatever it was that took place. They had this huge
excellent point.
parade. They have power in numbers, or they have had power in numbers. Now we're just starting to kind of tip that scale when we have on the ground tons and tons of people now who are interested, who are emotionally connected to this cause, and those are the people that have never been in Scientology, because there's more of those than there are of us, and we need those people. We need those people championing us. And the other thing that has only changed as of 2024 is that we don't have this power, these power players within this anti-Scientology movement able to continue their own narrative that suits the cover-up of their own crimes. Now we have an opportunity, only as of this year, because only this year is when we actually know what the fuck is going on. I wasn't aware that this shit was going on. I was beginning to find out about it in last year, like through the end, particularly towards the end of last year. But we now have this opportunity to really make a difference. And I think bringing back these efforts for, like what was done in the UK, this public benefits test, if we can bring back that effort in Australia and call for that, there's a few of us, a small group of us, we're going to be protesting at the Melbourne org very soon. And that will be with T from Perth Scientology Audit, and she's, gotten a few people together. So there are Australians that are really passionate about this. We need to sort of grow those efforts. We do that by talking about our stories and talking about what the real problems are and what are the continued impacts to children that they're continue to experience today, and the efforts to put a stop to that harm. So it really requires the masses to get behind it, not just Senator Xenophon and Carmen Rayner, not just Brian Seymour, and you know what I mean. Like it's gonna have to take thousands of people crying out for the same thing, demanding. There's the book 1985 by George Orwell. There's a line in there. It's like the power is with the proles, which is basically to say the power is with the people. And the thing is that the people have to wake up and realize that the power is with them. And when you can get a movement that's heading towards being, I think we're going to get stronger and stronger, and we can get louder and louder. And there's power in that. The power is with the people. The power is with us. We have to demand the change.
We must. And again, going back to this point of Scientology protesting, right? It's like there's been a bandwidth that has been exploited on purpose with misinformation, altered importances. An adult is having another problem with another adult. Let's really all opine. Let's really all have a conversation about it. Let's all follow the drama of an adult having a problem with an adult. It couldn't be more pathetic to focus on that problem. When Miriam and I were stuck at the hotel, all manner of journalists were having problems with, we just found out that this adult said that, and we just found out that this adult said that, and Debbie Cook had a problem with this, and Mike Rinder had a problem with that, and Marty Rathman had a problem with that, and all of the abusers that were preying on the kids have been cradled and canoodled, have been treated like infantile. Oh, you didn't know any better? So the year is 2024. So they've had their decades to process what in the hell they've done. They've had their decades to come together and go, oh, you know what? Maybe it wasn't a good idea what in the hell we did. Maybe we were a little too full of excrement because the convicted felon pitched all this BS and we really took it serious. Maybe we should have not involved kids. That would be a great cognition for all the Scientology parents to start having right the F now. That is also a great cognition for all the executives to start having right the F now. Because again, when you make this very convoluted problem of a lot of stuff, and then, I heard about Sinu, I heard about this religion, I heard about all these things that have nothing to do with the issue. And with what happens and the type of danger that children are exposed to. That's the only area to focus on. So, Senator Xenophon, if you were told that there were other areas, really revisit that. Really revisit that and really double check what it is. Because again, Carmen Reyna, and there's Miriam Francis, and there's me, and there's hundreds of us that were essayed as children inside of those hotels, and everyone's running around like, we all exist in an island and must have just really happened to you. And to your point, Miriam, we only know this the way we're saying it right now. So the time to get a coalition together, like you're saying, get people to understand who the victims are, get concerned citizens that are allowed to be
Yeah.
advocating on behalf of kids who are stuck in these hotels that have no advocates, that have no parents, that have only abusers and predators, compliments of L. Ron Hubbard. So it is that dire, it is that sick. They're all exposed to a risk that is not being confronted by the people that are being, saying that they really want to learn about this. It's not being confronted the degree and the extreme nature of the abuse. That it's not that it happened to you, Miriam, and then all of a sudden you were just at the wrong place at the wrong time. We know that there's another little girl that's replaced you inside of that hotel. Once they were done with you, once they discarded you, we'll replace Miriam with another Australian underage girl. And so is my situation, right? They've just replaced me, put another child auditor to be doing the child audits that I used to be doing for them, put another child to supervise the courses that they had me supervising. So we couldn't be more disgusted and nauseated about that fact. And again, we're finding the children have been, I did it in my prior live, I reacted to this very old footage where it showed a child at St. Hilda in East Griston working with all the adults. So this problem has been from the inception what it was.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I think like my mind goes to Jennifer Gorman's situation as well. Where like when you're talking about if it's not us, it's somebody else, and that often it tends to be. I mean, it's just a perpetuating thing because it's a system. That's the thing, and it will repeat the same thing over and over. I mean, Jennifer Gorman had no one to advocate for her. She experienced sustained, horrendous attacks over the period of 1 year.
Miriam, you don't
every
only
day
just
she was
have
going into
someone
that
that's not
organization.
advocating for you. Imagine in those hotels, you have a predator called the case supervisor who is being informed every time you're being essayed, who is being told A, B, C, D, E, F, G of how you were essayed inside of the hotels when that came up, as it was in the case with your father, as it was in the case with all the other predators that get a complete floating needle package inside of those disgusting hotels. And all of a sudden they're selling floating needle packages to self-admitted felon child abusers.
Yeah.
In what world is that acceptable in some sort of civil society that really believes in civility? There is no world. There is no world. There's no advocate because there's only predators, and there's only predators in systematic positions that are doing the bidding pitch by a convicted felon, normalized by a convicted felon. So, but these people are doing his bidding. So the case supervisors who nobody ever speaks about, they're the first and most disgusting abusers there is in Scientology. They're the ones that are listening to all the criminal activity the minute it gets registered in one of their machines. They're the ones that are getting reports, video recorded. Where is their plausible deniability of these people if they've recorded it all, if they transcribed it all? Because that is a question we should be posing to these courts. In what world are these people going to say, oh, we really do have plausible deniability, innocent until proven guilty, but you video recorded it all?
Yeah. And well, so interestingly, we've seen there's a couple of things, a couple of cases, but we've seen where Scientology will actually remove all of the records. So for example, this select committee that I mentioned earlier, which was 1985, around that time period. And what they did was they removed all, and my mother was part of that mission. She was in the OSA mission. She was an OSA staff member, and she ran that mission. She was the mission in charge. And one of the tasks that they had was to remove all of the records. So that included the session, all the PC folders, which is the records of the counseling, the quote unquote counseling sessions, all of the ethics records, all of the public records, everything. They removed all of it, and they moved it from Adelaide, South Australia, the select committee was for South Australia. They moved it to New South Wales and had it at the Sydney organisation buildings. And these are the lengths that they would go to. I know there was an inquiry. This other case that I'm thinking of was in regards to a man, I believe it was in Queensland, and he was undergoing services. He was doing auditing, Scientology auditing, and he ended up committing suicide. And they wanted to do an inquest into his death, and they did do an investigation into it, but Scientology had denied them access to any of the records of the sessions and what was discussed, and had removed it, had sent it to the US. So like these are some of the things. So I guess my point in saying that is like, it's when coming back to it, it's been a battleground there. It's not been without efforts on government or, you know, legal bodies or interested parties or anything. It's not been without effort over such a long period of time. It's that Scientology has been able to thwart these efforts in a number of different ways. And it's not helped by the fact that we have had people in this movement who have been trying to sabotage things from the inside. And I want to talk about that for a second, because back to Senator Xenophon bringing, you know, trying to bring this inquiry into Scientology and using this public benefits test. He was able to get a hearing, which was, I wrote it down, it's the Senate Standing Legislation Committee, where he was able to bring in a bunch of Scientologists to talk about, basically to give statements that would affect this change and bring about this this inquiry. And unfortunately, at that time, and this took place June 2010, and at that time, I spoke to, and sorry, let me just say this by saying I've spoken recently with one of the people who was in that room, one of the people that gave those statements. And what had happened is that they were told very specific things that they were allowed to say and not allowed to say in terms of like the frames of reference, I think is what it was called, terms of reference or something like that, or whatever. There's things that they were allowed to state and weren't allowed to state, and there were certain rules that they were given. They each had prepared statements, and just right before they went into that room to give their statements, the statements were changed, like as in physically like scratched through with a pen. This is what's being alleged by one person that was involved. They have told me that it was Mike Rinder and Marty Rathbun being involved through phone calls or messages or whatever to these people that were going to be going in there into changing their statements. And this meant that when they went in to do it, actually it almost got closed. And there's footage of that online. But anyways, as in it was like the televising of it was going to get closed because of the things that they were saying that they weren't supposed to say. And ultimately it meant that that effort then was not as effective as it could have been. It could have been really, really, you know, something that would have created a massive change for Scientology in Australia. And it was thwarted from within, the sabotage within the movement. When that person then came out of there, she then went back to like the anti-Scientology movement and was like, hey, listen, this isn't okay. Like Mike Rinder and Marty Rathbun got involved and it messed things up. That person was then ostracized from the group. They were then, they were effectively dead agented and, you know, labeled as like a crazy person or whatever, or like that's what tends to happen. And then that person's not listened to, and then they just get sort of kicked out of the group, and that's what happened. And now I've heard now stories, many of these type of stories where that's happened over and over in regards to people criticizing Mike Rinder over these years, which is a very scary thing. So we really have to recognize if we're going to change the narrative, like if we're going to correct the narrative, then we really need to recognize all the things that have happened, that have come before that have created the situation that we're now involved in. And on that point, if you don't mind, do you mind just pulling up that article, which is the one,
let's finish the video because we're still on it.
Oh, okay, so we haven't finished that yet. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Are those allegations that are made in the doco, Nick?
Well, there are allegations that relate to effectively blackmailing of some of their celebrity their celebrity Scientologists.
See, Here we go.
Right.
Like, it's because they never care about the right thing. They go for the celebrity angle. Oh my God, the celebrities are really in trouble, you guys. They're getting blackmailed. It really sucks to be them. The celebrities were grown as men and women that signed lengthy consent forms that wire transferred money out of their accounts to go get exactly what they were asking to get.
Mhm.
So, in what world are adults, grown men and women, being considered like, oh my God, were you really blackmailed? Does it really suck to be you? I mean, yeah, I'm sure that if this was an adult 21 and up club, maybe, sure, then go focus on the people that are saying or alleging that they were blackmailed, even though they paid, even though they transferred money to their accounts, even though they signed invoices, even though they were all about it as full grown adults. But we always get this same exact BS, like, oh, people are really getting blackmailed. They're paying for it. Somehow
Yeah.
it doesn't count. Somehow, oh, we really have to come and rescue them. It doesn't work like that. It doesn't work like that when you're a consenting adult and you've signed all manner of legal paperwork to really say, this is what I want. L. Ron Hubbard showed you the books. L. Ron Hubbard told you what an audit was. L. Ron Hubbard told you what an ethics handling was. L. Ron Hubbard told you what the courses were. Where is the repudiation of any of that on the public record by anyone that was an adult? That's where I question this idea that there are victims. If you're going to be a victim of something that you paid for, consented to, and then on the aftermath of it all, you're nowhere to be found, repudiating and calling yourself out and saying, oh my God, I couldn't have been more out of my mind to have done what I did, then where is the ethics change? There is no ethics change. These people were allowed to be out ethics, lawless, child abusers inside these establishments, aided and abetted by these governments. The legal framework was established by Australia. The ones that didn't do the due diligence in the first place to pick up the book from L. Ron Hubbard to really go, damn, it says right here that it's an 8-year-old wants to get a kiss and is getting kissed by a grown-ass man, then it's a problem of the child. Maybe this is going to be a problem for us to really go with, this is a very charitable hotel that you really want to prop up here in Australia. But
yeah, and the thing is, Serge, the thing that I would say the thing that comes closest to that is the Anderson report, which was, I think, was one of sort of the pedestals of the banning of Scientology in Australia, because it did get banned across a few states in Australia for a period of time. I think that the trouble that you have is then what you're up against, this religious protection, because as soon as you get that religious, so when you can cry, like, for example, it's one of our freedoms, right? It's one of our recognized freedoms is to have the right to believe in whatever you want to. And I think there is that, once you're able to get that cloak over the organization, then, obviously they've been
Miriam, but again, going back to that, that's a false pitch. That's a false pitch. And unfortunately, that's what all of these people fell for, the false pitch that Mike Rinder and Marty Rathbun and David Miscavige really put together. Let's really type up here that we really want to save our world by enslaving kids. Is the year 2024, with a straight face, all these legal bodies need to answer to us. If really, oh no, you've not understanding, we really want to protect that. Make the hotels 21 and up. That's what we're demanding. You want to go believe whatever in the hell you want, fine. As long as those beliefs are not going to place a child in 100%. Harm's way. That is that simple, right? It's like this idea, it's been all convoluted because it's like, oh my God, but the religious aspect, believe whatever in the hell you want, Scientology people. No one's coming out of your torture chamber to come and get you out. If you're paying to be tortured, if you're writing it off of your taxes to be tortured, if you're signing an invoice to be tortured, if you're signing the consent for it to be torture, by all means, make the case that you were not in on the torture. We dare you to make that case. To us now that we're adults, us now that we can see through the facade and the gaslighting and the manipulative agendas to end up inside these hotels with unfettered access to children while everyone around plays dumb.
Yeah.
The law says child trafficking is illegal. So which one is it? Is it legal to do it when you put a cross and a convicted felon wrote rhetoric? By all means, Australian legal people, write how that works. Make that logic make sense, because it's illogical AF what was done to us. We couldn't be more aware now. Did it take us decades to figure it out? Yes, you better believe it did. Our abusers were good at what in the hell they do. They were professional groomers of the best kind. But it's time to stop this wishy-washiness about how, oh, you know, it's a religion, and if we really just go with this and go with that. No. Children are being abused in these hotels is unacceptable. Whether your parent agreed to you getting abused or not is inconsequential, because we are aware of what that problem is now. We are aware of the type of permissions our parents gave that allowed this BS under this guise. Yeah, when you and I were there, we also thought it was very religious and it couldn't have been more legal. That's why we didn't suspect anything. And how many years
we were sold that pitch too. We were sold that pitch too. And the thing is, that I was going to say is that one of the things that Senator Xenophon was saying publicly was that, you know, it's not about religious beliefs. Anyone can believe whatever they want to believe, but they can't go and do whatever they want to do. So that was a point that he harped on again and again. That's a really important point. This isn't about religious freedom. This is about protecting children from harm.
And again, Miriam, like going back to defend the policies of the convicted felon. Even if you want to make it, oh yeah, you know, you can believe he's a convicted felon, L. Ron Hubbard, that was on the run, that proposed through his policies. We have receipts of those policies. We have receipts of what that convicted felon told everyone to believe. And those receipts prove that they end up without scruples. Those receipts prove that they end up normalizing abominations at an industrial size scale being committed against unsuspecting minors that cannot consent. It's that simple. No audits can be done on kids. No ethics can be done on kids. No grooming courses can be done on kids. AKA the entirety of Scientology, the three things that Scientology is completely and utterly indefensible to expose any child to it, period, full stop. It always results in abuse. It always results in being kept against your will. It always results in what is literally classified as kidnapping. So by all means, going back to, like, you know, check on ChatGPT, what constitutes kidnapping, and then see if audit sessions literally fit that definition, because it actually does fit the definition. And again, no one has called it out like that, because I guess the adults that were doing these role plays really did get off on them. Well, we didn't get off on them. Breaking news to all of y'all. We couldn't be more disgusted or nauseated. And once again, for the people in the back, we're here speaking about it, not because it even happened to us as kids. I am fine and welcome to move away from this subject, never to speak to it again. But guess what? Kids are stuck in there. And guess what? They are voiceless. And guess what? They have no shred of advocate. So the same dangers that we were in, they're in. And the same inefficient advocacy that's been going around for 74 years that has done nothing to stop it, nothing to rein it back, nothing to even go, well, okay, then no, 18 and up. And then you can, you know, but before... There's just been no guardrails, no admission of the guilt that they all have. And it needs to be confronted for what it is, because for far too long, we're getting the same, you know, washed up narrative of like, oh yeah, the Hollywood celebrities are being blackmailed. Let's really all coalesce and come together to rescue them.
including John Travolta. There are allegations about the way that they have spied on people. There are allegations in terms of unethical and potentially unlawful behaviour in terms of the way they conduct their operations.
It's not potential unlawful
Yeah.
behavior. Do you see what I'm saying? Like, and I
Yeah.
get it. Going back to perhaps that was all the information this man had at the time, given the corrupt sources of info he was
Right.
tapping, meaning Mike Rinder, meaning Marty Rathbun, two of the biggest abusers, normalizers that were Goo Goo Gaga for L. Ron Hubbard. Maybe that wasn't the best people to be tapping to get the info for you. Maybe they had a vested interest. Maybe they were running circles around you because they are that smart, because they are very highly aware how to manipulate, how to gaslight, and how to control others. They're specialists at that. L. Ron Hubbard, their daddy figure that they modeled their entire behavior over, literally gave them the A to Z of how to do that. So we keep going back to this, like, you know, potentially illegal things. If children are being turned into slaves inside of a hotel, is that potentially legal behavior?
Right.
Because I haven't seen
Yeah,
him say
and
that once.
yeah, and at that time, I mean, Scientology's been greatly crippled in the coming years since 2010. But between 2009 and 2010, when Senator Xenophon was doing these things and speaking publicly, and I don't know what he personally experienced from Scientology as a result of that sort of the consequences, but they were quite a might still at that time. They were very powerful. So I do hold him in quite high esteem for the bravery that he had. And you know, and everyone else,
Miriam,
I
it's
mean,
called
even
they're
the prime
elected to office.
minister.
It's called, I'm sorry, but it's called they're elected to office.
Of
It's
course,
called
I
that's
know.
their
No,
duty.
you're
It's
right.
called
But
again, it's like, you know, it's no, but I'm just pushing back for myself, you know,
let me
and I'm
say
not
this
saying
as
that you
well.
can
Like
have,
even no, I know,
yeah, but I'm,
I know. And I'm obviously gonna, like, my heart is with Australia. Obviously, I have, you know, it's my country. I'm very proud of this country. But even the prime minister at the time made comments saying, like, oh yeah, it sounds pretty bad. Like, sounds like they're doing some bad things, but I'll just wait and see what Senator Xenophon does. And that's where I'm saying that it takes a collective. It can't just be one independent senator up against this, like, unachievable. Like, what he was able to get out into the public, that in itself was incredible. It wasn't enough, no, because it took other people. Like, why is the prime minister saying, like, oh yeah, well, it looks like it's kind of bad. Ooh, could be something there, but I don't want to do anything
because
unless this
again,
other
they've
person.
refused to confront
It's
the
not
evil nature of the
right.
problem, Miriam. They have not confronted it. They have wishy-washied it. They have said it was adults having problems with adults, and we really want to intervene, and we really want to figure out how to do it. And, you know, if a person that becomes aware of the severe, disgusting amount of child trafficking and abuses that go on inside of those hotels that get video recorded, he should have been literally sounding the alarm everywhere. And 10 years later, he should still be doing it. We had Ray here just talking about how she contacted him and he didn't. Yeah, Ray just said she contacted him and he never answered, you know? So
He's not
again, it's
interested
like,
anymore. No, because you have to understand. I
yeah, but,
mean, like
oh, no,
no,
no, no, no, no, no, no. You don't get to,
Okay.
no. You don't get to not be interested in a child being enslaved. So you either cared
Fair.
for the cause or you don't give an F, because otherwise you're
That's
being
fair.
transactional and you're being like, oh, I'm really going to push this forward and I really do think I'm going to get something out of this, but I didn't get what I wanted. Okay, well, F everything. You see what I'm saying? And that's only the point I'm making. It's like, those are the facts. Like, sure, yeah, you know, half act for trying to do something. Yes, at the time it was very revolutionary, seen as very revolutionary, but you know, the fact is that we're still here in this year 2024 with nothing has changed. And that's why it's not.
And we also had, right, and to that point, we also had people sabotaging the movement from inside. And what I want to say is, like, you know, I felt a little bit defeated after all of that. You know, I had such incredible, you know, I was so encouraged by the things that were happening during that time period. And until 2012, and it was sort of 2012 onwards that there just hasn't really been anything happening in Australia in particular. And so I felt a little bit defeated. But what I want to say is like, once people understand that all these things have been going on behind the scenes, just understand that we just need a renewed effort, and we could achieve some really great things from 2024 onwards. And
Well,
we
we
can
need a
look
real
at,
cause, first of all. Renewed effort, it's not a renewing, right? Because we don't need that effort that was being done. We need a new cause. We are here setting the record straight. It's children who need help.
yes,
It's children who cannot consent. It's children who have no advocates. It's children who are
yeah,
put in harm's way by their parents, put in unthinkable and defensible situations. It's systemic, it's institutional. Doesn't matter if your parent wanted to be a degenerate, wanted to be an abuser. By the time L. Ron Hubbard has his way with them, by the time they both consent to agree to all the garbage that L. Ron Hubbard pitched, all the misinformation that he wrote down on pieces of paper to feel better about himself. And that's the point. The point is that there is no plausible deniability. There is no, oh yeah, I didn't know any better. All the adults that were actually doing this stuff knew. They have nowhere to be found to take that responsibility. And yes, to your point, we do need more people to come forward and to help. And starting with those, we're inviting all the ex-Scientologists that knew children were being tapped to service others inside of hotels. Ask yourselves now with a straight face, what kind of not out point it is for adults to go, oh yeah, I'm here to get serviced.
yeah.
And a child's supposed to be brought to me to service me. What type of adult goes to a hotel to get serviced? So
Yeah, and it's interesting, Serge, because the narrative of this was a religious experience has been perpetrated within this community. We have been gaslit ourselves, coming out into this anti-Scientology space, and there's been people in this space saying, oh, well, that's what I did when I was under the influence. Like, so I guess it doesn't matter. And it was I was the greatest good at the time. I thought I was doing good things. It's like, okay, well, guess what? You weren't. You were harming kids. You were harming people. You were harming vulnerable persons. Like, and you were in a position of power and you had authority and you did damage. So then it's not good enough for you to say, oh, I thought I was doing good things. It was I thought it was my religion. It was my belief system. Like, stop talking about your fucking beliefs. This has nothing to do with your beliefs. This has everything to do with actual harm that has been done and that is continuing to be done. That's it. End of. So you are right where there needs to be, this is the new movement of the way that we're talking about things. Like, all that bullshit before, that was people, largely was people and under the influence of people who had participation in those crimes, who had incentive to continue to cover up those crimes. And so then you have everything is going to be, it's not all going to be coming out into the light. And now it needs to all come out into the light from now onwards. Like, yeah.
absolutely. Let's see what else he says.
It's quite damning, and I think it's best for the commissioner, for the ACNC, to look at that closely as to whether some of the associated entities of Scientology should at least show cause, should indicate whether they are complying fully with Australian law and whether they're in any way involved with some of these activities overseas.
Senator, I find it strange that they're called a charity in the first place. I mean, they call themselves a church. And really, most people think they're a cult. But I wonder, do other churches in Australia, like the Anglican Church, the Presbyterian Church, the Catholic Church, do they have charity status?
Yes, they do. If under the Constitution, if you're classified as a religion, then you get tax-free status. And I think that's fair enough. But with that should come some responsibility in terms of some openness, some transparency, to show, as they do in the UK, that you have to show that what you do overall there's a public benefit, that what you do, you're doing more good than harm.
And I mean, again, here, the slap in the face for me, Miriam, it's just like, I'm like, in what world do we have to question where these people are doing more good than harm? Again, if this was a 21 and up operation of adults, maybe that assessment would work. Maybe be like, okay, are they really helping? Are they harming more? But in the case of any child that ends up ensnared in their clutches, they're just being harmed. It's just they're just de facto harmed, the kids that end up in their clutches. So there's nothing to see. If anyone is harming children, if anyone's taking children to a hotel and harming them,
Right.
what are you going to call it? Oh, it's called child trafficking. That's all it is. Because I thought it was a religion, because I thought child trafficking was going to save a world, because anything you do in furtherance of your child being abused is a felony and it's a crime, and there's no world in which that can be reframed as a religious anything. So we couldn't have been more far off from where the attention needed to be. And luckily, you know, here we are on the flip side, how many years later, you and I really taking this apart and really reacting and really pushing back on the glibness of the subject. Because again, you know, I get it that it's not easy for people to hear kids getting abused in the ways that we have described. It's not palatable, but you know, they do need advocacy.
All right. This is like the grotesqueness of it. Like this, when we're talking about this narrative and this religious experience and all this kind of thing. Like, so, I mean, just as a contrast, we had NXIVM. We saw the prosecution of, was it Keith Raniere and criminally, right? And so, and we saw the fall of the NXIVM cult. Well, we talked about this earlier, and you pointed out, well, that was adults abusing other adults. It wasn't, or certainly not to my knowledge, I haven't heard of any children in that organization, that cult.
I think there were just a couple. I think there was a couple of them that were underage.
Primarily, it was adults upon adults. Right?
There was some school, there was something, but I mean, again, NXIVM was this small compared to the gigantic operation that Scientology runs.
Let's frame it this way. NXIVM hadn't been around for that long. And pretty quickly we saw the dissolution of it, right? We saw the destruction of it. We saw action being taken. This religious loophole is just such a comfy, cozy position that Scientology is able to, you know, live inside of and maintain and protects them. And it is the unfortunate reality of it. And then in terms of like this kind of like religious experience, Mike Rinder on his Exposing Scientology podcast, he recently did an interview with a couple of the former leaders of NXIVM. And it's just such an insane, I mean, these people sound incredibly intelligent, incredibly smart, and great communicators. This man and this woman, I think they're married. I can't remember what their names are, but what you're talking about is like, I mean, I don't know what the extent of what they were involved in, but they're talking to Mike Rinder as if he is the same as them. Like, he was a global human trafficker. He helped create the infrastructure of this organization that has and continues to, hold captive humans and subject them to torture, essentially psychological tortures. Like, it's not the same. And so when you're like, and then their conversations like, haha, and they're like, oh, and we really look up to you, Mike Rinder, you're such a role model, and oh, like we look to you as to, like, when we were thinking about whistleblowing, it's like, what has Mike Rinder whistleblown about? He's only ever talked about things that we already knew about because Marty Rathbun told us about them or somebody else told us about them. And so, yeah, this idea of like, oh, well, we were doing it because we thought we were doing the right thing. It's like, it's just not that. Like, when you're actually harming people and committing crimes, then it's not just like a something that we were mutually in agreement with and decided to participate in with each other. It's like, not when it's
again,
children,
had Mike Rinder had only been targeted adults and this was all an adult thing that they were all in, yes, it could have been compared apples to apples. But given the fact that Scientology tapped underage kids at such a large scale, it couldn't be more different.
There you go. Thank you for you said that more clearly than I think I was attempting to. And another interview, incredibly enough, just really quickly, also recently on his podcast. This was an interview with this guy named Brendan Teague, and it was done with his wife Christy. And that was fascinating because he was talking about, and this is a guy that clearly adores Mike Rinder, clearly has a current, relationship, friendship with him. And so that was interesting because I was like, oh, this is good because it's kind of, if anything, it's going to be biased in the other direction. And that's kind of good to get that perspective. When he's openly talking about how he was recruited at 12 years old, that OSA was targeting the young children, that the OSA staff member came into the classroom and was like, all right, I want these young kids, da, 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 da. He was one of them. And he starts working. He's talking about he's working around the clock, and like he's also doing running errands, like getting them like their sandwiches and their whatever. And he's working under Mike Rinder. Meanwhile, we know that Mike Rinder has access to all the laws. We can see his name stamped on documents that talk about the current labor laws at that time period. So it's incredible. You have this person that has all this. Mike Rinder is also different in the way that he had access to all the information. He had access to the lawyers. He had access to all the legal, what the laws were for children, and not many other people had that level of access that he had. So that's another
That
incredible
part.
part. He did it full
Yeah,
knowing.
that
Yeah.
part. Exactly. Like Mike Rinder can speak legalese. Mike Rinder knows how to speak to lawyers. Like all of these things were something that we had no short of a clue about. So let's see what else.
Yeah.
And I've met enough victims of the Church of Scientology here in Australia to have some serious concerns about the level of harm they cause to individuals that can be caught up in cult-like activities.
Because, Senator, give us some of those examples, because for some time you have been involved with trying to investigate the Church of Scientology, haven't you?
And there was a Senate inquiry several years ago in the context of the Tax Act, and we heard some pretty alarming evidence. I mean, there are people that have lost their life savings who felt pressured into buying courses with the Church of Scientology, where people describe being almost like slave-like labour, work.
See, almost like slave, like labor BS. And again, this is the point of why we are exactly where we are, because they won't confront evil, because they won't confront the facts. Children were made slaves, period, full stop. Adults that want to really cry because they paid a lot of money for courses, yes, it sucks to be you. And if we had more bandwidth to go babysit you now after the fact and to really go and advocate because you lost your money because you gave it to them, fine. But the point is, going back to the people that are crying that they lost their savings were the ones that were trading their children into this. My parents lost all their money into Scientology. They were pressed to give them more.
Yeah.
Because they would get status, because they would get told, oh, you're such a great person, you're such a great boy, whatever. And yes, it sucks to be an adult that is stuck in that cycle of stupidity. So yes, we are advocating for you all, Scientology parents, in the right way. We're not advocating for you as, oh, you poor little victim, you had no short of a clue. No, in this year 2024, that ship sailed. You've had decades to get your act together, decades to come clean, decades to stop giving off paperclip withholds, which you are all very aware of what you're providing to these networks, what you're providing to these senators, what you're providing to all these things, all these sanitized talking points that L. Ron Hubbard taught you all about. Oh yeah, really give the short story so you don't get caught in the criminal act. Well, the kids that you abused, the kids that you forced to have a front row seat inside your dysfunction couldn't be more disgusted.
Yeah.
And yes, we are reclaiming our voice. And yes, we are not in agreement that we were co-opted and we were the people that you made us be for you. We couldn't be more repulsed by what's taking place. And the fact that it's still going on with kids. And yes, in Australia, a country that purports to be all about freedom and this and that, slavery is alive and well. And yes, in America, a country that says, oh yeah, we're really going to type it in our constitution, slavery's been abolished. BS. United States of America, you made child slavery great again. So congratulations on that. Congratulations on carving yourself a loophole. Congratulations on the law as a profession having such a crisis of credibility. Because with what kind of two sides of your mouth you can go, we really do abolish slavery and it's very illegal. And then you go make your backroom deals with the IRS so that child slavery can be brought back to the shores. Because for the 10th billionth time, adult slavery from adults that want to be doing that work, that want to be treated like shit, that want to be in that disgusting, dysfunctional dynamic is not illegal. You cannot save somebody that is hell bent in being part of that.
Mm-hmm.
And that is what is not being confronted. These adults like it there. They want to be there. Kids do not. Very, very complete. Couldn't be more diametrically opposed. The experience that a child is having for themselves as they're being locked up in these hotels to an adult that was very well aware that they were going to lock them up in the hotels. My parents were well aware. Your mother was well aware. All parents in Scientology are well aware the type of stuff that they're doing behind closed doors. They all loved it. They were all enabled. They were all about it. So maybe today would be a great day for all those Scientology parents to really start coming clean on what in the hell they did. Because if they never come clean, how is it ever going to change?
Working for the elite Scientology organizations, one terrible allegation of a woman who said that she was coerced into an abortion, a very serious allegation. These are all sorts of issues that need...
An allegation that was literally settled in court. I'm sure he's talking about Rebecca De Crescenzo. I mean, unless they also did this in Australia.
Might have had an Australian case, yeah. Not sure.
Well, I mean, it was birth control. In the Sea Org, that's how they controlled the birthing of babies. I mean, in America, everyone's going, oh, yeah, like, you know, this is not a case where we're saying abortion cannot be had, you guys. But this was disgusting ways that this hotel made as a standard operating procedure to force women who didn't want it to do it. So... I mean, again, in what world is any of this really giving religion to anybody? Because whoever is really going with that pitch, including all the courts of Australia, including all the courts of these United States, you couldn't be more pathetic or idiotic. Again, it's a crisis of credibility what the legal profession is really showing, because child slavery was made legal because the stupid courts of Australia and the United States said, bring it back. We can't wait to have more child slaves in our country. We love it. Let's send Miriam off to another country to get enslaved. Let's send Serge to another country to get enslaved. And let's have a great time enslaving kids inside of these hotels.
Need to be looked at very closely. And I don't have an issue with what people believe in. I think that it's a free country. Freedom of religion, freedom of belief is fundamental in Australia, but behaviour is a separate issue. If you are behaving badly and you're getting a tax-free status, then I don't think, you know, you can be doing both.
Correct. And it's not behaving badly, it's behaving illegally.
Criminally.
Breaking the law, right? Like,
absolutely.
Child slavery is illegal. So they're not just behaving badly. Oh, bad boy, let me really slap you on the wrist and just go, okay, bad boy, stop doing that. No, it's not just bad. It's completely outrageously disgusting. It's pathetic that we have these countries that really go, we really have a legal system in this country. Well, the legal system could be more dysfunctional or broken because it's nowhere to be found to enforce the toothless laws that, from the fact that in the year 2024, all of this is still going on, shows you how toothless and pathetic the law really is at the end of the day.
There are countries in the world, Nick, including Germany, that don't recognise Scientology as a religion. They see it more as a cult, and so they don't have the tax-free status. It's a grey area when you're sort of talking about it in those sort of areas, isn't it?
It is a very great.
It's not a great area when you understand that is the children who are the ones at risk. And that's what I'm saying, Miriam. It's like we have to keep going with this because, again, it's like it's been made such a great area. This whole, it's a religion. We really have to look at it like that. Or we can really come. If parents sign up to be part of a school and in that school, they're doing illegal activities to the kids, no one has the right to say, don't tell me how to raise my kid. I want to commit illegal crimes on my child. That
It's
is
called
not
child abuse.
thing.
Yes.
It's called child abuse,
Correct.
you know, and you have to have informed, powerful, adequate advocates that go, look what it says here in the law, kidnapping is illegal. Look what it says here in the law, child trafficking is illegal. You can't do this because look what it says in the law. But not enough of that is going on because, again, this BS pitch that L. Ron Hubbard was any type of religious man couldn't be more laughable or pathetic. Anybody else that regurgitates that is part of the literal problem. I mean, period.
Agreed.
Very grey area. And in the UK, they don't have tax-free status because they didn't pass the test of public benefit. In France, what I'd like to see is...
Well, here we go too. In the UK, they don't have the tax-free status. And yet they do have children that are ensnared. And yet they do have kids that have been essayed that no one is given an F about. So this idea that the hoity-toity UK is so much better, miss us with your complete and utter BS. You couldn't be up to your neck and ears in complicity and in complete stupidity to have your countries hosting these disgusting, depraved hotels. So before the UK really wants to go, and for anybody who wants to go, oh my God, if we really just take their tax status, is really going to help somebody. It doesn't help the kids. All these technicalities.
It's step one and then I think it's like step one and then step two. I think that they have to be criminally prosecuted. I think that you'd want to start.
Yeah, but it's like, but again, it's like you don't need the step one. You don't need the tax exemption removed to open up a racketeering investigation, criminal investigation. Nothing protects you from harming children, doing it full knowing, recording it, video recording it, transcribing it, paying for it, showing invoices. Everything was done full knowing. So if that's your business model, you are completely effed. And since all Scientology parents were donating kids to that business model, all Scientology parents couldn't be more effed. All Scientology parents couldn't be more implicated. All Scientology parents couldn't be more co-conspirators of this crime that took place under your watch. So we don't need the technical BS bureaucratic, we're really going to take a tax exempt. And then if they don't take the taxes off, we're really helping no children. As long as children are involved, no one is doing anything other than platitudeville. I mean, again, we have to think about it how it wouldn't have helped us at all to not have tax exemption. What we needed was criminal investigations open after you were essayed, after I was essayed multiple times.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, because really, I think it's the government, isn't it the government's responsibility, to make sure that they're not creating safe spaces for crimes to occur. Like there shouldn't be these pockets, regardless of whether you're a religion or not. It doesn't matter. There shouldn't be any way of distinguishing if the crime is the crime. If you committed that
bingo, right? We can't go with a gun and say, oh, we shot him because that was a religious experience. Like you commit a crime, you go face your crime and go do the time for the criminal act you perpetrated. And again, in our case, because we were kids, because we were gullible, because we were innocent, because we were completely co-opted, and
Yeah,
groomed
we were
into
trafficked.
becoming part of
Yeah.
this disgusting thing, we
And we didn't
see
have a
how
choice as well. Yeah.
none. So this is why it's so important to advocate with this actual, fact on our lines.
Is what they have in France. They have a cult busting organisation. So if people are caught up in a cult, if people are vulnerable, if there's psychological duress, then there's an organisation that actually helps those individuals, and they've been very effective in taking on Scientology and other cult-like behaviours in France. So I think we actually need to have a cult busting agency in this country.
See, again with the cult busting, like, you need child services. You don't need cult busters. You need make sure that children aren't being put in harm's way. Miss us with the cult busting. Miss us with all these people that are going to go and take on all these problems from all of these adults that want to be ensnared in disgusting scenarios for themselves. I mean, it sucks to be that adult. It sucks to be making that bad of a choice for yourself. And again, Miriam, if these crimes were actually prosecuted for what they are, how many people would have been saved from doing the exact same disgusting illegal crime? Maybe your mother wouldn't have been involved if she would have heard, oh, we just indicted 10 mothers in Scientology for trafficking their kids. Maybe my mother wouldn't have been involved if she would have learned, oh, look, all these women that dumped their child in a hotel in Florida are now facing 20 years in jail, which is the crime that it states in the law it is.
Yeah.
So, L. Ron Hubbard did teach us one thing, you guys. Definitions are very important. Well, in what world is the business model of Scientology fit the child trafficking definition almost line by line? So if it's child trafficking, is child trafficking. That's what it's called. That's what it is. It's a crime. It sucks to be us. It sucks that we had such demented parents. It really does suck. But it sucks more for kids that haven't lived to tell. It sucks more for people that are already not here and completely unalive themselves because of the systemic 365 levels of abuse dished out to them in disgusting sessions that weren't helping that child. So, I mean, again, we're one of the lucky few that have woken up to all of this disgusting dysfunction. But today, there's plenty other kids that are not so lucky, and that's why it matters.
Country that can give the support that people need when they're caught up in these organisations.
It'll be very interesting to see how all of this unfolds. Senator Nick Xenophon, thank you very much for your time this morning.
Pleasure.
We really appreciate it.
Thanks.
A bit of feedback that's coming in on this topic from you guys at home. Let's have a look. This from Kim. A charity should help others outside members' beliefs. If not, deregister ASAP.
Very good point.
I mean, and I love these comments that they're putting up here. This
There's
was way
always
before.
that comment, yeah.
But I mean, like you said, right? It's like they should be deregistered so that they're no longer a charity. I mean, it's still scraping at the very top of the problem. If you can only conceive the problem as, oh, it's just a matter of technicality. It's just a matter of like, oh, this one calls it potato
Status.
patata. Like it's not potato patata here. It's class A felony for a child to be ensnared, to be subjected to that, and completely legal and acceptable and available for an adult to lock themselves up in the hotel. If the adult pays to be tortured, if the adult knows that they're going to be tortured, like they give them all the info in the Scientology, here's what is going to be asked, here's what's going to be done, here's what the word you need to clear, here's all the info. Scientology tells the people what they're going to be doing to them. So don't think for a minute that no Scientology had a shred of a literal clue. They all knew it. If they're not looking at it the way they need to be looking at it, that is up to them to soul search themselves for what was being provided in that hotel that bamboozled them and that made them drunk with this level of delusion.
Right. And if you murder somebody under the influence of something else, like you've still murdered them, like you've still committed that act, you've still committed
And
that
you'll get
crime. You're still
prosecuted.
responsible for your exactly. You're still and you can state your case. I mean, your lawyer can help you state your case in your defense, and that could be the argument of like, oh, I was under the influence of this. We saw that in the Charles Manson case as well. But it's like, but you still committed the act, and you still deserve to be prosecuted for your crimes. At the end of the day.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Now, before we wrap, because I do have to go in a couple minutes, but do you mind bringing up that article that I mentioned? Just because I just want to like hammer that point home, and I really just want to, and that's called the title of it is 31 Factors. It's was originally written by Marty Rathbun actually, and Mike Rinder put it on his blog on the 25th of May 2010, where he basically, I think he just copied and pasted Marty Rathbun's, but the title is 31 Factors or something like that. And the point I want to drill home is like, let's recognize what's happened, what's, sort of come before us, and realize no, like we still have so much that we can do. Okay. Yeah, here we go. And we won't spend a lot of time on this. I just want to hit some highlights, and everyone can sort of go back to this if it's something that interests them. Just Google it. 31 Factors from Marty Rathbun. This is an article posted by Mike Rinder, May 25th, 2010. And just if I can just skip through a bit of this, but basically to start it off with, he's saying Scientology founder L. Ron Hubbard discovered methodologies that can enhance self-determinism, increase freedom of choice, and bring about higher states of awareness and beingness to those who practice them. Hubbard developed a method of confession that includes unconditional forgiveness and results in more able, happy, and peaceful beings. Hubbard developed an ethics system that an individual can apply to himself to improve his worth to himself. Anyways, it goes on and on. It's basically saying like Scientology and Hubbard, they're amazing, they're incredible, and just like, change your life, help and heal the world and the people. Okay, so we go down from there. These are the points that they're wanting to drill home. So if we go down below where it's like 1, then it becomes all about David Miscavige. The whole rest of the points are Scientology has been taken over by a self-appointed dictator, David Miscavige, who has basically subverted Scientology and reversed it. What does it say? It says instituted the virtual practice of reverse Black Dianetics. So Miscavige has basically squirreled Scientology, and then in his quest to attain power, Miscavige forcibly removed no less than 4, and it goes on and on and on. Like then number 3 is like, since securing his position of power, the statistics of Scientology have steadily decreased, and basically this is all Miscavige's fault. Now, again, you have to realize this is the same time period that the FBI was doing their investigation. You had these people. These are the people that were giving the information to the FBI. They were saying, like, do you know what I'm saying? Like, this is the narrative. Scientology is totally fine. Doesn't do anything bad. Oh, good. The beliefs and the practices. And I thought I was doing something good. But it's David Miscavige. He's the bad guy. And he does all the bad things. And this is the narrative that has been going on for years and years and years. And that's what we have to do a lot of work to change and to correct. But I do encourage anyone to go and read that.
Like, let's really, like, in the words of Marty Rathbun, regurgitated by Mike Rinder, who has not taken this down, supporting the narrative. Scientology founder L. Ron Hubbard discovered methodologies that can enhance self-determinism. Are you stupid? Are you
trying
disgusting?
To sell us Scientology? Like, what the hell? Why is this even in this space? Like,
self-determinism. In what world, Marty Rathbun, disgusting Marty Rathbun, in what world is a child becoming more self-determined by getting locked up inside of a hotel? If you want to make that case about you and your adult bodies that were all about this disgusting methodology that you pitch with a straight face after you left the hotel, mind you, after you had time to decompress from all the disgusting things you normalize inside of there, and then you write this piece of bullshit. Oh yeah, they're going to enhance self-determinism, increase freedom of choice. In what world was our choice being increased by having our passport locked up while you were interrogating me in a bank vault Marty Rathbun, because that would be great for you to start typing the how you helped me achieve more freedom of choice and self-determinism by locking me up in a disgusting vault and having your way with me, as you very well know. So it is in their
these are
own words. Their delusions are not hidden. The delusions are not, hiding anywhere. It's literally here. Hubbard developed a method of confession that includes unconditional forgiveness. Well, there you go, you guys. Here's from Marty Rathbun himself. The unconditional forgiveness of pedophiles is what Marty Rathbun really wanted to say. Since Marty Rathbun was himself the one that sent the self-admitted pedophile to go be my twin in the RPF. So again, these MFers really want to go, oh, unconditional forgiveness. Aren't we such the goody two-shoes here? Unconditional forgiveness for self-admitted felons. Marty Rathbun, you by all means start typing something to make that make sense to the US government. That's it. Type it to the US government. Why I gave unconditional forgiveness to all self-admitted PDF files that were coming to the hotel by Marty Rathbun. Why I allowed and got all the info from the PDF files at OSA to really crisis manage as needed, Mike Rinder. Why I, Debbie Cook, spent hundreds of thousands of dollars giving these self-admitted PDF files ways for them to circumvent the law after I became an accessory to their crime by mode of getting all the info put on a piece of paper, written and transcribed, and also video recorded so we could really watch. Rewind again. Okay, oh, look, he just said that he essayed that girl on the second floor of the Coachman building in the bathroom, and that underage girl was giving him a blowjob, and that she blew him for 3 minutes straight. And it happened this many times, and they use a lot of saliva to get it all lubricated. That's the level of details these people were interested. That is the level of details that this man is saying. Unconditional forgiveness is an L. Ron Hubbard amazing thing that we really have to preach here and really tell everyone about so that the FBI doesn't come after us, Ghislaine Maxwell's on steroids of David Miscavige that we all were. Because if we revisit this little thing, this is what in the hell is giving. Here's Ghislaine Maxwell on steroids, Marty Rathbun, making a case why Jeffrey Epstein did this, why Jeffrey Epstein did that, why Jeffrey Epstein did blah, why Jeffrey Epstein did blah. Well, you, Ghislaine Maxwell, Marty Rathbun, were bringing the kids to the hotel. Yeah. So miss us with your BS that, oh, if David Miscavige wouldn't have been around, then you would have been the top child abuser. So sure, you can put David at the very top of the pyramid like a cherry on top. That dwarf can be up there. But then all his enablers were right behind him, which includes all the Scientology executives and includes all the Scientology parents that donated kids to this criminal racketeering, child trafficking conspiracy. And it's not by mistake. It's by design that this happened. So
you have the perpetrators of crime reveling in the motivation to commit the crime, still believing that the motivation to commit the crime is valid. And these are the people, 2010, I mean, Mike Rinder said, I gave all my documents to the FBI in 2010 for their investigation. Okay, but then you look at the fucking article that's on his website from 2010 and you understand what his mindset was: protect Scientology at all costs. The person that has to be destroyed is David Miscavige. End of. That was the system that he was operating on. He and Marty Rathbun were in the ears of the people that were in that hearing to bring the public benefits test that could have affected major change, sabotaged it from the inside, because this is what the attitude that he had. This is evidence, this clear evidence. This is what his mindset was during these very, monumental, pivotal actions in Australia and America. I mean, like having the FBI actively investigating Scientology is a huge deal. it's a huge deal. Having a senator standing up and wanting to bring an inquiry into Scientology, we haven't seen that in a long time. And these are the things that we need to kind of get back to. Hopefully we'll get these opportunities again in future and realize like what has happened, what has taken place, that the key players who we thought were advocating for us were in fact not doing that. They were covering up their own crimes and still in that mindset of that everything was okay, everything is justified, because they were all having a religious experience and they were continuing
Because
to
the
have that religious
methodologies of
experience.
L. Ron Hubbard couldn't have been more useful and amazing and wonderful. And
Yeah.
no, the methodologies of L. Ron Hubbard were deranged, disgusting materials that are indefensible on their face.
Yeah.
At face value, you couldn't defend that with a straight face today. You couldn't defend that to us, the kids that know what in the hell y'all were really doing inside of the hotels.
Yeah.
It's disgusting. It's unthinkable. And I'm glad that there's more community. Thank you for all of you who are joining us in,
Yeah.
raising awareness to who are the victims that have been ignored by every single person around. As is in the case with all the most horrible, disgusting predators. They prey on children and they prey on animals. They prey on things that cannot harm them back. It was all a calculated effort for them to have their disgusting pigsty of crimes against children. Recorded crimes against children is what you have on the record, Marty Rathbun, as if you didn't video record you interviewing me as a child, asking me what was getting me off and if I was masturbating. Why in the fuck were you so interested in that, Marty Rathbun? Were you really helping me? Were you really gaining something about choice and power of choice by your bullshit, disgusting rhetoric of the convicted felon that you worshipped and you're still worshiping and you're still out there purporting and having this blog from Mike Rinder to really sanitize the narrative of all the parents that really thought Mike Rinder, that really thought Marty Rathbun, that really thought Debbie Cook was, so amazing and wonderful. Let's really go and see them. They're such opinion leaders of us. Well, double check on your opinion leaders today, Scientology parents, because thanks to your stupidity, you endorse these disgusting opinion leaders that led you astray AF. And now you're going to have to deal with those consequences, big adults that you are all. So no more cradling and canoodling adults that are fully consenting to be part of this racketeering scheme. The sooner you come out, the sooner you repudiate it, the sooner you start making amends, the sooner you start contributing to children not being abused, the better it'll be for you. The more you double down, the more you triple down on all your disgusting bullshit, including publicizing with a straight face how, L. Ron Hubbard, the methodology was so great and amazing. I mean, look at this. The confession that includes unconditional forgiveness and results in more able, happy, and peaceful beings. I'm sure all the PDF files that you gave them complete unconditional forgiveness, Marty Rathbun, are very peaceful and happy things to you. But you know what? Go defend that to the FBI Crimes Against Children Unit. Go show the FBI Crimes Against Children Unit one video recorded session of a child. And if those FBI agents are not vomiting on the floor, then they have no humanity. All they have to watch is one audit of one child. I would not be able to watch that today. I mean, imagine watching that today, Miriam. It's like watching a child be tortured. What kind of sick, disgusting, depraved, degenerate enjoys that and pitches that and puts himself here with a little doggy? Let's really sanitize my image. Let's really show myself smiling with my little doggy as I'm so cute and wonderful. You're a disgusting Ghislaine Maxwell, Marty Rathbun. You were enabling your literal Jeffrey Epstein on steroids, chairman of the board, RTC, that you facilitated all of this for. So stop looking somewhere else and start looking at yourselves in a mirror, Scientology parents, Scientology executives, current exes, The whole lot of you. If you brought children and the children were trafficked in the hotel, we're speaking to you. The day to wake the F up is today, not tomorrow, not mañana, not when it's more convenient. The time is now. So stop being out ethics, stop being a criminal, stop being a child trafficker, stop endorsing all of these disgusting things, and get your actual ethics in and go. Visit Nick Xenophon, beg him to restart some sort of investigation with the right things in mind, with the right victims in mind, because that would be helpful to start doing for a change. Show us that you care by showing that you actually gonna go and follow the law, not just blab and get nothing accomplished and still be here in this year 2024 with nothing changed. Those are my final words. What are your final words, Miriam?
I love it. No, I think it's been a great conversation, and I think it's been an important conversation, and one that, you know, I think we'll continue to have. There's so much more detail to this, and this is a really good way to just sort of like highlight some key points. And I really appreciate everyone for tuning in to us. And, you know, this, when I say it's about the collective, it's about each one of us. You know, the people who support us and are interested in this, are interested in what's happening to the kids. I mean, we couldn't do this without that. And that, you know, just having your interest in what's going on is really, really important to us. So we appreciate that very much. Yeah.
And I love this comment, Sandy. Unconstitutional forgiveness doesn't equal not having to face consequences. And yes, I mean, I think that's even a good point. Look, I don't give an F that y'all did that. I understand that L. Ron Hubbard did have a lot of undue, disgusting influence over you. It couldn't be more evident. However, consequences are the result of choices that you all made as adults. So you're being told to become aware of the problem and actually join the solution for this problem.
Yeah.
You know, if you don't want to be part of the problem, then join the solution. That's all it's going to take so that we can actually help kids. So we'll continue going live every day, you guys. Please make sure you follow Miriam at Rage Against the Dark Arts. Please make sure you like and subscribe to our channels to continue helping us advocate for the kids that are stuck inside the Scientology hotels, and to continue on our quest for justice and for actual legality to be shown in the countries that purport that they're all about that. So thank you guys so much for watching, and we will see you guys very soon. Bye-bye.